Welcome! In the last lecture, we created different parameters for us to take the look of our ground layer. And now with these things ready, it's about time that we add in other textures to this layer. And for that, we'll need to start modifying this landscape layer process. So double click to open it. Then I'm going to go to the material function where we are processing this base color texture. Based on our current setup, it's really easy for us to add in normal texture support and ORD texture support. So I'm first going to select all of these nodes, then press Ctrl+D to duplicate them, so that I don't need to replug everything again. Then I'm going to change this input texture from base color texture to normal texture. And for the sort priority, I want this one to be below base color, so change this one to 11. Then for the preview texture, I'm going to right mouse button click and bring out a texture object. And now instead of this default texture, I'm going to change this to default normal. And select this one. So this is the default texture that comes with Unreal. If you are not seeing this, make sure you have show engine content and show plugin content enabled. So I'm going to select this normal map and plug this texture object into preview socket. And just like that, now this texture bump RGB will be the output of our normal map. And same as the adjustment for the base color, I like to also adjust the strength of our normal map. And for that, we need to bring out two component masks. So the first one, I'm going to mask out the red and the green channel. Then hold down M on my keyboard and plug this one into the A socket. For the B socket, we'll need another function input. So bring another one out. I'm going to call this one normal strength. Change its input type to a scalar and give it a preview value of 1 and take this use preview as default. And for the sort priority here, I'm going to go check my last one. So it should be this tint. The sort priority is 90. I'm going to change this one to 100. Then plug this one into here. Then I'm going to bring out the second component mask, and this one is going to mask out the B channel. Plug this one into here. So the output of our normal map should be a float 3, and we'll need to combine these two values together. To do that, we can use an append node. So use this append vector, plug this one into here. And just like that, we have our normal output ready. I'm going to cache this output, use a name rerun now. I'm going to call this one cached normal output. Then I'm going to go to the output of the material function. First, I'm going to add a new socket and change the name to normal. Bring out the cached node and plug it into here. Then I'm going to click apply and go back to the material. Now we have an error saying missing function input normal texture. So we'll need to give this socket a texture, and for that I'm going to duplicate this ground base color, change its name to ground normal, and change its sort priority to 11. And it's also important that we change the texture in here. So instead of default texture, we'll need to change this to this default normal. Now the sampler type will become normal, and I'm going to plug this one into this normal texture. And for the normal strength here, I'm going to use the alpha socket inside of this detailed adjustment. So rename the alpha channel to normal strength and give it a default value of 1.2. Then plug this one into normal strength. Alright, that should be all we need for the normal map. I'm going to click apply and go back to my material instance. I'll need to fill in the normal map for this ground layer. So bring out my content browser, select this normal map, and take this checkbox, click this icon to fill it in. And go back to my level. Now I have a normal map for this ground layer. And we can also take the normal strength of it. So currently the strength is 1. If I change this to 2, this is the end result we get. And if I lower this one down to 0, we don't have normal strength anymore. So I'm going to increase it to 1.2. And that's all we need for adding the normal map. So these are the new nodes that I just added to the landscape layer process. I simply duplicated all the nodes we have and changed the name to normal texture. And these nodes here are for us to control the strength of our normal map. And back to the landscape material, I simply added a new texture parameter and plug in the alpha channel of this detail adjustment to tweak this normal strength. So if you like to catch up with me, you can pause the video now and give this a go. I'm gonna pause here for a few seconds, then we're gonna move on. Welcome back. And the last thing that we need to add in for our ground layer is the ORD texture. For that, we'll need to keep modifying our landscape layer process. So I'm going to first go back to my auto landscape material. And I'm going to bring out my content browser. So for this ORD texture, the compression settings is masks. And this is something that we need to take into account. So I'm going to go back to my material function. And I'm going to select all of these nodes. Then press Ctrl+D to duplicate them. And this time, I'm going to change this from normal texture to ORD texture. And change the sort priority to 12. And for the preview socket here, I'm going to bring out another texture object. And this time, I'm going to change the preview texture to default mask. This is another texture that comes with Unreal. I'm going to select it. And now the sampler type will be masks. And I'm going to plug this one into the preview socket. Then for this texture bump RGB, this is how we need to handle it. So first, we'll need a component mask. I'm going to take the red channel and plug this pin to here. So this will be our ambient occlusion. I'm going to cache the output of it using a rerun now. I'm going to call it cached AO output. Then we'll need to use a second component mask. And this time, we'll need to take the green channel. So this will be our roughness. And for the roughness output, I'm going to use another lerp node and plug this one into the alpha socket. So for the parts that are white, the value for roughness will be 1, and for the parts that are black, the roughness will be 0. Then I'm going to cache the final output of it using name rerun now. I'm going to call this one cached roughness output. Then I'm going to go to the output of this material function. We'll need 2 new sockets. The first one will be the ambient occlusion, and the second one will be this roughness. For simplicity's sake, I'm not going to set up extra function inputs for us to control the strength of the ambient occlusion or the roughness. For the landscape material we are creating, we simply don't need those. So I'm going to right mouse button click again and bring out this AO output, plug this one to here. Then right mouse button click again, bring out this roughness output and plug this one to here. Then I'm going to click apply. And we have another error message that's saying we need input for this ORD texture. And for that, I'm going to select this ground normal, press Ctrl+D to duplicate it, and change this one to ground ORD. Then change its sort priority to 12. And change this default texture to default mask. So select this one and plug this one to here. And that's all we need for this ground layer. I'm going to click apply. Go back to my material instance. We'll need to fill in the ORD texture in here. So take this checkbox, bring out my content browser, and having the texture selected, I'm going to fill it in here. Then hit save, go back to my level, and this is what we have. We've just added in ambient occlusion and roughness to our ground layer. So these are the new nodes that I just added to my landscape layer process, and the setup is very similar as the ones we have. Then I add in another texture parameter into the landscape material. So if you'd like to catch up with me, you can pause the video now and give this a go. I'm going to pause here for a few seconds, then we're going to move on. Welcome back. And the last thing that I want to add in to our ground layer to make it look even better is macro variation. And for that, we'll need to go back to the landscape material. So I like to apply my macro variation onto the entire landscape. And for that, we'll need to first get hold of the base color of this landscape layer. So we'll need to use a get material attribute node and plug this pin into here. Then we can add a new socket here to specify which attribute we want to get. So it's this base color. After getting hold of the base color, we'll need to bring out our macro variation. So I'm going to type in custom and bring out this macro variation. Then I'm going to hold down M on my keyboard and plug this base color into here. And before I plug this pin into here, I like to control the macro variation strength. For that, I'm going to hold down L on my keyboard to bring out a lerp node. And I'm going to plug this pin into socket B. And for the value inside of socket A, I'm going to give it a value of 1. And for this alpha socket, I'm going to right mouse button click and promote it to a parameter. I'm going to call this one macro variation strength. And for the group here, since this is a global thing, I'm going to create a new group for it. So it'll be 0, 0. I'm going to call it global control. And for the default value here, give it a value of 1. And for the slider max, I'm going to give it a default value of 1 as well. So I'm clamping the value here. When the value is 1, we'll be using this macro variation fully. I'm going to plug this one into socket B. And when the value is 0, we'll be multiplying a value of 1. And that really wouldn't change anything for our base color. And the last thing, we'll need to bring out a set material attribute now. And we also need to specify which attribute we want to set. So it'll be this base color. I'm going to plug in the material attributes to here. Then plug in this one to base color. And plug in the final result into material attributes. And that's pretty much it. We've just added macro variation to our landscape material. I'm going to click apply and go back to my level. This is the end result we get. And we can tweak the strength of our macro variation. Currently, the strength is 1. If I lower it down to 0, this is the end result we get. So I think a value of 0.8 looks the best. And there we have it. Our ground layer for our auto landscape material. Looking pretty cool. So these are the new nodes that I just added to my landscape material. For setting a certain material attribute, we'll first need to get hold of it, then perform the operations we need. Then we'll need to use a set material attribute node to set it. Then this pin here will output the adjusted material. This is also something that we'll use over and over again later in the course. So feel free to use this as a reference if you need. And it's time for you to add in your own macro variation to your landscape layer. I'll see you in the next lecture.